Welcome to the Prophecy Club. We are going to do a series because I think it's important that we all understand that these hurricanes, while they probably are the hand of God, they probably are the judgment. As you recall, Dmitri was told that God is going to send all kinds of hurricanes and floods and storms to weaken us, to show us his hand. Okay, so okay, I understand. They probably are the judgment of God. But we also have to understand that the hand that God might be using to bring that judgment may very well be the hand of the Russians. Again, I can't guarantee it's them, using scalar wave. And I can't guarantee it's scalar wave. However, I want us all to understand what scalar wave can do. So here's what we're doing. I'm going to be playing the audio of two of what I consider to be the best, most informative DVDs out there anyplace, specifically talking about scalar wave. Now, the first one is called Russia's Secret Weapons to Defeat America by Bill Snebel. Let me briefly tell you about this. Bill reveals technology that the Russians have that can knock out anything on the land, on the sea, under the sea, any place on the globe with little to no trace of it. It can make large areas of the atmosphere super hot, as in tornadoes, hurricanes, or super cold, as in snow and ice storms. And the other one is Weapons of the New World Order by Nick Begich. This one also discusses the same thing with additional information on HAARP, also how it's used in military applications, and how it can also be used to basically put an umbrella over the entire nation of Russia and any of our planes or our missiles that we might throw at Russia. It could defeat them all, like big umbrella over the whole nation. Each DVD is valued at $30. This week, we're making both of them available in the Scalar Wave gift offer for a gift of just $30. Both DVDs for a gift of $30. prophecyclub.com or 785-266-1112. The Scalar Wave gift offer. Now let's go listen to Weapons of the New World Order by Nick Begich.
Now, you and I naturally, when we sit down and we read a book, our brain activity flows into that right frame to where we can take the material in, remember the portions we need to remember. We do it naturally. Well, a lot of young kids don't do that naturally. And there's a number of reasons why. I mean, there's a lot of environmental factors that contribute to the problem. But one of the things that's been found to be quite useful is a thing called brain biofeedback. Now, what that is essentially you're hooked up to an EEG, these things that connect on the outside of the skin that measure brain activity. And it's fed directly into a computer, so you see in real time on the screen in front of you what your brain is doing. Now, for little kids, they don't want to see a bunch of squiggly little lines. So they design software that maybe has a bouncing ball. And when they bounce the ball at the correct level by, fooling around with their own brain activity and the way they focus their attention, they learn how to bounce that ball so that their brain wave activity is in that frame where they can learn. And what they found is after 30 or 40 sessions of about an hour apiece, most kids can learn how to focus their attention and learn without Ritalin or any other drug and do what we do naturally. In fact, do it a little bit better than what we do naturally because they're trained very specifically. And the difference is they're directing it, not someone else. They just learn how to exercise that muscle, if you will, the brain, in a way that allows them to learn how to focus that attention. Very, very powerful in terms of what we can do. Now, why wouldn't the pharmaceutical industry be too excited about that? It's pretty obvious, It's all about money. The thing about it is that's an expensive therapy. Now, everyone in this room, everyone who hears this video is going to say, I know someone who's hyperactive or has a hyperactive kid or has an attention deficit disordered kid. I want to know what we can do. First of all, this therapy is expensive. It's not inexpensive to tie up a clinical psychologist for an hour or a biofeedback practitioner for an hour 30 times. But I'll tell you the organization. There's an organization, it's a Biofeedback Association. They're based in Denver, Colorado. They're in their yellow pages. They have practitioners that are certified all over the country. It's something that communities need to pull together. Churches need to pull together. When we have those kids, find a way to get them the treatment, get them off of that Ritalin, get them off of the drugs that are really hurting them, and damaging them. The biggest injustice, the biggest inhumane aspect of these weapon systems are the technology that's being developed for military applications is denied to health practitioners, the very people that need this knowledge that could revolutionize medicine in this country. When you're talking about systems that can kill, you're also talking about the same systems that mean that we've learned enough about our physiology, our internal makeup, to perhaps change the shape of medicine. And I would suggest that in our lifetimes, we're going to see electromedicine as a concept become more and more mainstream. It already is in many parts of Europe and other parts of the world. It's going to be here, and it's going to lend itself to some great, great changes. The other thing I want to talk about as it reflects on all these technologies is the effect on young people in terms of military personnel. Think about what military personnel go through in their upbringing today. First of all, they're exposed to unprecedented volumes of violence through the media, through television, all the things that deliver violent messages and sort of desensitize children, young people, to violence in and of itself. Then we enter the battlefield environment. Now think about the Gulf War. The Gulf War and the direct conflict, over 100,000 people on the other side died, and in the direct conflict, a couple hundred on the U.S. side died. Pretty extreme ratios. Now take a look at Kosovo, where tens of thousands on the other side died, and virtually no one on the American side died in combat. Now, why is that? It's because our technology is taking us further and further from the engagement itself. So now, sitting at the end of a computer terminal is a guy playing the equivalent of a video game, delivering ordnance into the battlefield, delivering weapon systems to the battlefield that are killing thousands of people. Now, the difference is when our fathers and grandfathers came back from battle, they had the smell of death still in their nostrils and a desire to not see their children and grandchildren engaged in the same thing. Because we all recognized that that's the last thing we ever want to do. Sometimes a country's called into those conflicts. But if it becomes easier and easier to engage in those conflicts, we'll be engaged in many, many more than perhaps we should be. We're making conflict and killing too easy. We're taking the humanity out of it. And we're conditioning this next generation to accept that as okay. This is one of the greatest sins, is to kill. We have to exercise a decision on whether or not we kill for our own defense, whether or not it really is our own defense. Or are we protecting the interests that are quite contrary to the American value systems, to American interests? Are we just protecting multinational interests, corporate interests, economic interests that work against us as much as they work against other countries? We need to ask about the engagements we're engaged in, and we need to ask about the direction in which our wars are fought. And we need to find ways to make sure we maintain the absolute toughest decision-making matrix when we decide to get engaged. We just can't get involved in every conflict for economic reasons. It's just fundamentally wrong. Going back to sort of where some of these technologies go, and this is one of the big concerns, is one of the things that the military is very concerned about is the media attention to conflict. Because obviously, as we saw in the Gulf War and we saw in Kosovo, as soon as the photos start coming back, we all get real excited because we don't like the idea of particularly innocent civilians getting killed. And it happened in both conflicts. I mean, we can go back and look at all those photographs and think about it, and it ends up shutting down the effort. So getting the media removed, non-lethal weapons are one of the things that they came up with, because if there's nothing to photograph, there's no carnage to photograph, then it doesn't make the 6 o'clock news and doesn't generate the kind of concern that people with values, ethics, and morals might have when they watch people get slaughtered. The other side of that is non-lethals are not really non-lethals. In fact, everything you see in the military literature talking about them, they say, yeah, there is a certain level of lethality that can occur with these weapons. And they lay out a couple of things. Let me give you an example. One of the things that came up, sticky foam, we hear about it in all the media reports. This is stuff that they spray and you're stuck, and you can't go anywhere. And they discovered that it really didn't help much, because if they had a gun, they were stuck by their feet, but they're still shooting the gun. So they decided to solve this. So they inject electricity into the sticky foam. So now your muscles convulse and you just pull the trigger randomly. It's just bizarre. This is non-lethal. But think about non-lethal. Think of sticky foam on your face. What would you rather have? Suffocate to death or a bullet in the head? The fact of the matter is, non-lethals can be very lethal. Pepper gas, the things they used in the WTO. The gases they used there against American citizens. Do you realize that you can't use those same things in combat? It violates biological and chemical treaties. And that treaty has an exemption in it. It's domestic use. What you cannot use against a declared enemy, you can use against your own citizenry. And over 100 people have died from pepper gas in the United States because they have lung disorders that cause asphyxiation, because you have asthma or something where that really affects you and kills you. Non-lethality, according to the military's own definition, is a weapon that doesn't kill over 25% of the time. A Claymore landmine does not kill over 25% of the time, and it's far from non-lethal. Because it doesn't usually kill, it usually just takes feet off and legs off, but you might live through it. Blinding lasers, remember when they came out? The idea that you could blind somebody permanently using laser weapons, and they were quickly outlawed by international convention within months of being discovered by the average person in the public when the media finally took the issue up. Many of these systems, these weapon systems, would be equally objectionable to the mass of American public and the world public if they knew they existed. And this is, again, part of our work is to carry these issues out there. And just since this book's been out, when we tabulate up the amount of radio we've done on the subject, we've probably hit a good 30 million people so far. And that's increasing. We do a lot of things to get the issues out. But the issues have to get out because that's the only way in which things will shift or change to any degree. One of the other things is this idea of black projects, which comes up all the time. You know, what is a black project? It's a project by the military or intelligence community that's so secret even the United States Congress doesn't get the information. A handful, a dozen or so or less of our congressional leaders actually get to know something about these projects. But they get to know about it in a closed room behind closed doors with one team that has a very specific agenda is only going to inform them to the degree in which they feel they need to inform them to get the money. Now, how much money is involved? The United States Air Force budget, according to the Washington Post, in 1997, 40% of the Air Force equipment budget.
We'll be right back after this message. Well, the truth is almost no people on earth agree on all points of the Bible. But if you listen to the Prophecy Club, the Spirit of Prophecy Church might be just right for you. Our two most controversial beliefs are speaking in tongues and post-trib. But you might have to attend a long time to see anybody speaking in tongues, and we don't really make post-trib a big deal. But our two only sticking points are Jesus is Lord and the King James Bible. So if you're not attending a church, or if you're maybe looking for a new or a different church home, especially if you like to listen to the Prophecy Club, Spirit of Prophecy Church might be a fit. Most of our congregation found us via Prophecy Club, and many actually drive long distances to attend. We suggest you visit at least 5 times before making your decision, and if you walk in Sunday morning about 10:15, you walk into coffee and donuts. You're free to leave anytime, no questions asked. So, if you listen to Prophecy Club, give us a try. Spirit of Prophecy Church, 2540 K Avenue in Plano. That's on the corner of Park and K, like the margarine, right behind the Whataburger. Spirit of Prophecy Church, 2540 K Avenue, Plano, Sunday, 10:15. Ask for Stan. The number one killer in most emergency events, surprisingly, is drinking contaminated water. Being able to scoop water out of the puddle and filter it may save your life. I drink all of my water filtered through a Crown Berkey. Now, it's a gravity filter filtering down to virus levels. Contaminated water in the top gives you drinking water out the bottom. It's what the missionaries use. There are 7 Berkey options from 1 to 8 filters. Order them at prophecyclub.com. Be sure and order 2 to 4 extra black filters as backup. That's prophecyclub.com or 785-266-1112. Berkey water filters. And now, back to the program.
Now, how much money is involved? The United States Air Force budget, according to the Washington Post, in 1997, 40% of the Air Force equipment budget. That's a huge budget. Remember, a new bomber is about $1 billion. 40% of the Air Force equipment budget alone was for black-funded projects. This is a huge amount of money with no accountability. Accountability really is the issue, because as we move into the privacy questions, this is where the rubber meets the road. Because as the government becomes more opaque and more difficult to look inside of, to see what's going on, our lives become increasingly transparent. Essentially, at this point in our history, what we used to think of as private is now available to anyone with a will to know. I mean, whether it's what they're scanning in the grocery store, your medical records, any public records that are digital, any medical records that are digital, virtually anything in a computer bank dealing with your finances is available to anyone with the will to get that information. The government's ability to get that information is tremendous. In just one database alone on American citizens, 3.5 billion records are kept, where once they've got your name, they can find out lots of things about you. Now people go, well, I don't have anything to hide. What am I worried about? It's the same thing they used to say in Nazi Germany as they kicked in your door. You know, I mean, in Alaska, they tried a program called Knock and Talk. This is where a 6x6 rolled up with National Guardsmen and 2 state troopers came to the door, knocked on the door and said, "Hi, mind if we come in and look around?" They did this in Chicago and they did this in Puerto Rico also. And Alaska's the last place you want to do this because, you know, we're pretty non-conforming up there. We still have a little bit of a frontier spirit, and there were a lot of state troopers booted off the front porches of a lot of Alaskans. Lasted about 2 weeks. The fact is, this kind of approach to invasiveness is happening. And we have to look at privacy differently. What we used to think about when someone came to our door is privacy began at the threshold of our doorway. We have to think in different terms. Our digital doorway, the information that is held on us, is just as private as what is across our threshold. Because we haven't drawn that line is only because our law has not caught up with our technology. Technology, since the invention of the wheel to where we are today, is doubling every 9 to 10 months. That is a tremendous rate of change. Where does that take us into the future? According to April's issue of Wired magazine, Sun Microsystems, it's the only one making money right now in the fall of the stock market. They're one of their primary scientists and founders said that within 30 years, computers are going to be 1 million times more powerful than they are now. In our book, we say in 10 years they'll be 1,000 times more powerful, which is about right as you extrapolate things out geometrically. Now, what does that mean? That means one of two things. Either the computer on your desktop is going to be 1 million times smaller in 30 years, or 1 million times more powerful. Now think about the capability that's involved when you start to miniaturize technology. And what that miniaturization is referred to is nanotechnology. Things on a 1 billionth scale. Nanotechnologies. Now, you have nanotechnologies on one hand. You have information technologies, which we all understand, computers and the like. And then next to it you have biotechnologies. Things like cloning, growing brain cells on circuit boards, which they now can do on substrates of electronic circuits. Now, brain cells, you know, they go, well, you can't do anything with a brain cell unless you got neurons. And this was the big trick. You know, how do you grow neurons? Well, 3 weeks ago, the Salk Institute, you can go to their website and see it, announced that they grew neurons. Now you can grow neurons and brain cells and merge them into electronic circuits. That technology exists today. Now, as it advances and you combine information, miniaturization, and biotechnologies, you'll form a new science. Because when you look at sciences, it's always that way. If you go back in time, sciences tend to merge and form new forms of science that get new names, and we introduce those. And like nuclear science, you know, that didn't exist 100 years ago. Now it exists. You know, everything kind of gets combined, but what is it the outgrowth of? A lot of other types of engineering and sciences merging together. The same thing happens when these merge, except you're talking about super machines. In fact, what is projected in the next 30 years is machines that are capable of thinking and reasoning on their own, evolving themselves. In other words, machines that can build new machines. And as they build new machines and look at their logic circuits, you know, and they look back at what humanity's doing, how will they view humanity? You know, with the kinds of things we do to the planet. You know, the kinds of things that are spoken about in Revelations 11:18. You know, how will they view us? As viruses, you know, or will they view us as parasites on the planet? Will we be a hazard to their health? You know, it's an interesting concept, and it's the concepts that are painted by some of the leading scientists in the world right now and looking forward into the future. I mean, literally right now, even in this month. We lay a lot of that foundation months ago when we were researching and writing this book because we see it coming. Now, the fact is, where does all of that go? If you take the acceleration, you talk about microcircuits, microchips that people keep bringing up. Well, the first references we saw to them were in military documents going back to 1990, and we cite them. But think about the computing power of a modern desktop computer being able to be reduced to the size of a grain of rice. That is powerful. What can you do with that? You're starting to see it in the mainstream media. You see the ad of the guy going through the grocery store, shoving stuff under his coat, and he gets out, and then he runs out the door, and the cop chases him and hands him his receipt. It's because they figured out everything he took, they figured out who he was, and they sent him the bill and debited his account. That type of advertising is conditioning us for what's coming. Okay, it's right around the corner because they're already promoting it. We show the technology, we show the patents, we show how that rolls up. It's coming and it's not too far off. The reality is they're doing it for our own good. Another example is when you go to the bank and they ask you for your thumbprint now to cash your check. Call the bank and tell them you're moving your account unless they quit doing it. We did it in Alaska. When a bank got sold to a new bank, we said, look, we're moving our accounts. We're telling all our friends. I do a lot of radio. I'm going to announce it to the world. And you know what? The new bank, when it came in, doesn't require that. You got to say no. We'll move our money elsewhere. If they won't regulate it at the national level, talk to the little guy who's your state senator, your state representative, and make them install laws at the local level, because you can. That's what's happening in our state. We can do it where the rubber meets the road, where you can eyeball these guys and tell them what you object to. Thumbprints for kids, they may not think about it. We think about it because we always equated that with criminals. We didn't think about it the other way. Bill Clinton, a few weeks ago, he announced a new initiative. This is kind of interesting. He does these executive orders periodically that are supposed to be so wonderful. Well, this one was to forbid being able to use genetic information of federal employees. Not you and I. Protecting federal employees, public servants, giving them another layer of protection that you and I don't have. Does that make sense? And what they're saying is they want to restrict that availability of that genetic information because an employer who sees a predisposition to some illness may say, look, I don't want to hire this person because they might get sick in 10 years or whatever. Or maybe they'll have bad criminal genes, right? And maybe they're really thieves in wait. This is ridiculous. The idea that this information should be protected from one group of people and not all of us. We deserve equal protection under the law. It's a basic principle. We keep hearing them say it on the television in the last 3 or 4 weeks over other issues. Equal protection under the law. Ladies and gentlemen, we need that equal protection of the law. If there needs to be surveillance, let it be of government offices so we can find out what our employees, our public employees are doing rather than the other way around. It's an upside-down equation. Wouldn't it be nice if a parent with a restricted code could access their kid's classroom and see what's going on? To find out if their kid's behaving, if the teacher's actually teaching? Wouldn't it be nice to dial into the road maintenance crew's lounge to see how much coffee they're drinking in a day? Or how about dialing into some other office where they're really understaffed and say, hey, wait a minute, we got all these guys sitting around here for 3 days. Why don't we move that money over to this office where we need some work done? And they're overworked. Why don't we look in instead of the other way around? We have the technology. We have the capability. And why shouldn't we be able to observe our public employees? And you know what? They're some of the most protected people in the country in terms of privacy. We cannot look in by law in this country and do any of that without a major change in the law first. The idea of public accountability is, in fact, the only way to create the kind of changes that we're talking about. When you talk about things that are going on in terms of privacy, many of us have read the reports now, and we cite those, of where in Europe, to find a rapist, they're taking the DNA samples of every male person in the community to weed out the innocent. Where's the presumption of innocence there? And people are doing it. People are walking in, giving their blood samples. Their DNA, the most sacred part of who you are, the blueprint for your life. What God gave you as an individual to lay out who you were going to be. And they want to put it in a data bank and make it available to whoever wants to look at it. This is fundamentally wrong. This is no different than kicking in your bedroom door. It is fundamentally wrong. The idea that people are signing up and doing it, where things have really gotten out of hand is Great Britain, where they started installing cameras. Now, when you come and go from the country, you are photo imaged. You do not walk in and out of Great Britain without an image. Cameras now are so small you can get them down to 1/10 of an inch cubed with high resolution, which means the cost of cameras is dropping dramatically, and as a consequence, it's becoming more and more economic to install them on a wholesale basis. In New York City, and we quote it, they've got them all over the city along with microphones. You can't even walk down a street in New York and have a private conversation. And the mayor of that city suggests, you're in a public place. You're not entitled to privacy. Wait a minute. This is a whole concept that, okay, so when you leave your house, now you get no privacy? That is not the way most of us think. We assume we have a private life. Unless we're suspected legitimately of a crime, someone gets a proper warrant and exercises that warrant. And what they're doing is creating an environment of paranoia and fear, so we give up our civil liberties in exchange for what we think is security. Good example. Guns, right? This is the big one right now. 15,000 people in America got shot and killed by guns last year. Seems like a big number. 98,000 died from medical malpractice. And the only time you hear about that is when someone's carving their initials in a woman's abdomen. Now figure that one out. Where's the bigger crime? Where should the attention of the public be focused? On getting decent medical practitioners and a system of accountability for medical practitioners that can't get it right. But you know what part of their solution is for that? It's an interesting solution. All of your prescriptions now are going to be fed into databases to protect insurance companies from claims, because a lot of this malpractice is by subscribing 8 or 9 medications from 2 or 3 different physicians. They all interact and kill somebody. So now you load all that information into the computer, and now the insurance company will call the doctor and say, hey, look, here's a cheaper medication, use this one, and by the way, this one might have a side effect, so don't use it because you're interacting with drugs. Now that seems good and seems reasonable, but it's how far do they go? Because the other half of it is they're going to tell them to prescribe other medications that are more economic. And we're starting to see some of that, right? I mean, in terms of HMOs are getting nailed because of this nonsense telling doctors what to do. Now, there's a certain level of that makes sense, and other levels of that don't make sense. We need to look at our technology, we need to protect our civil liberties, and what's available to government or anyone else needs to be protected. AOL got in trouble. Okay, they got in trouble because...
Well, we've run out of time today. I'm going to have to interrupt right there, but I encourage you to get these 2 DVDs to understand about these storms like Harvey and Irma and how scalar wave very well could be hitting us. In other words, this could be the Russians, via the hand of God, hitting America. The first one, Russia's Secret Weapons to Defeat America by Bill Sniblin, defines how scalar wave works. Weapons of the New World Order explains how it works from a military standpoint to be able to knock out missiles, attacking airplanes, basically to defeat the mutually assured destruction that Russia and America has operated on since World War II. Each DVD valued at $30. We're making both of them available this week for a gift of just $30 in the Scalar Wave gift offer. prophecyclub.com or 785-266-1112. The Scalar Wave gift offer, 785-266-1112 or prophecyclub.com. Now from the Prophecy Club, some exciting opportunities for you. I'm the next speaker at the Prophecy Club. I memorized the book of Revelation, and in the process, God gave me 12 awesome revelations. Jesus is not the primary message of Revelation. What is? My biggest revelation, what is the morning star? Who are the 2 witnesses? The final answer to the rapture question. Definitive proof that America is in Revelation. And what is America's future? 7 signs to spot the Antichrist early. When does the New Jerusalem arrive? Are there 1 or 2 judgments? The surprising final plague on earth. October 14th and 15th, Saturday evening, 7 p.m., Sunday morning, 9 a.m. at the Prophecy Club, 2540 K Avenue in Plano. That's October 14 and 15, Saturday evening, 7 p.m., Sunday morning, 9 a.m., Spirit of Prophecy Church, corner of Park and K in Plano. No charge. It's on Revelations on Revelation. See you there. Order your copy of the DVD at prophecyclub.com.